I'm doing this for all the people that came here, just like my parents did, who sacrificed and gave their beautiful life in that island to seek a better life. Because, you know, the island is a beautiful place, but if you don't have the sources to feed and take care of family, you got to move on.
So once again, I want to welcome you to the PRA Center. This center was opened up in January. Puerto Rican Arts Alliance has been around for nearly 15 years, and about 5 years ago, we decided to expand into the Avondale-Logan Square community. This center was a big challenge for us, I must say, because this was a dilapidated building. It was going into nowhere, and it was going to be torn down. But we came across, and the opportunity came through a generous offer that was made by what we thought was a generous offer at the time by our alderman, our Ray Colon, but we had to raise about $2.5 million to get it up and going. It is a silver LEED building, so a lot of it was built with some sensitivity towards the environment. Even the terrazzo floor is made out of recycling material. There's a green roof here. There's a beautiful terrace on the side. We operate with 6 staff members, and some of them which are here this evening with us, Moises and Colleen, who helped me put this together. And we also, at any given time, are working with a dozen artists and instructors. I just want to pause and make some commercial announcement. There is parking at US Bank. If you parked across the street, your car will be towed, okay? So you don't want to park at MB Financial Bank. If you park outside, fine, you're off-street parking, but there is free parking at US Bank. The bathrooms are towards the back, should you need to use them. We're selling Cuatro Festival tickets here today. We're known because of our Cuatro Festival every year. We put it on. This year will be November 10th at the Harris Theater downtown, where we're one of the performing arts partners. So we welcome you, and we hope you can join us at the Cuatro Festival November 10th at 7 p.m. Tickets are being sold at the back with Colleen. And we're also selling membership to become a member of the Puerto Rican Arts Alliance. We hope you will help us and support us by buying into a membership. Now, a little bit more about the Puerto Rican Arts Alliance. We have programs. All of our programs, by the way, are completely free. We have programs. We're known because of the free classes that we've been providing for nearly 15 years of Cuatro and Spanish guitar at the Humboldt Park Fieldhouse building. Completely free, and then we offer those same classes at about 8 different high schools and elementary schools throughout Chicago. We have something called the Taino Project that talks about the indigenous people of the Caribbean, and we're teaching that through our curriculum. A curriculum that's state standardized, and it's being implemented in several schools as well. All of our programs, by the way, are done through a curriculum, and we use the state standardization to implement them in the different schools that we're at. We also have a Three Kings program, and here at this new center, we're offering free violin classes. Our dream is to integrate the violin with the cuatro as it's being done in Puerto Rico. And from time to time, we will also have exhibitions. This is not the first exhibition that we've had here. The American Civil exhibition is not the first one. Prior to that, we also had another Smithsonian exhibition, which was called Roberto Clemente, Life Beyond Baseball. It was here and it occupied both floors. We also have a studio arts program, teaching kids how to draw and paint. We're located in 2 centers now. Humboldt Park Fieldhouse building. We have not left Humboldt Park Fieldhouse building, okay? And we have a commitment to stay there. And we have a commitment also to grow in this beautiful facility that we've opened up. So American Civil Smithsonian exhibition, as I told you before, is at US Bank. It highlights the contribution of Latin music in America, in American popular music. And I want to segue right now to what you're going to, the purpose of this event, big gathering, which is listening to our guest lecturer, Carlos Flores, and his take on the music scene in Chicago for 5 decades. Carlos, I'm very proud to have been affiliated with him over the years. He is one of our, believe it or not, one of our founding board members earlier on when we started the organization, and did a tremendous amount of volunteer work. We almost drove him to the brinks when he was doing Cuatro Festival for us and doing some other volunteer work. So we're very glad to have him back home with us, and we wouldn't have done this American Sabor exhibition without including his expertise and knowledge in the music scene in Chicago. We also want to thank all of our volunteers that work with us, and that's very important to say. This particular lecture is also co-sponsored by the Illinois Humanities Council. They have a small survey that they passed along, so we hope you can complete it at the end and turn it back in at the front desk. Again, don't forget about our Cuatro Festival and our membership program. Look into it. Another other thing that we've got going on here, just one more thing here. There's a yellow sheet. If you want to join us for the love of music, the Jose Genera Memorial Scholarship Fund. This year we were approached by a group of people who belong to a music band, and one of their key musicians passed away, and he was very close to the Cuatro Festival because he attended it for many years, and so the family came to us and said, look, we want to do something, a benefit on behalf of PRAA, and so they're doing a benefit September 14th, and all proceeds will be used for the center and for the programs that we offer here free, so we encourage you to inquire about it and support this benefit that will be held September 14th. Thank you for joining us this evening, and now let's give a round of applause to our guest lecturer, Carlos Flores.
Make sure you turn off those telephones. I heard some of them going on a little while ago. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Puerto Rican Arts Alliance for extending me an invitation to be part of this exhibit, American Sabor, Latinos and Popular Music. If you haven't had a chance to see it, go check it out. It's kind of like a nice primer, introduction to the music. The exhibit covers like 5 cities, Miami, New York, San Antonio, San Francisco, LA, I think that's 5, right? And so it doesn't include Chicago, but Chicago played an important role in terms of being a supportive city to a lot of this music that was evolved. And as I go through the presentation, you will see that the kind of history that we have here. So I've been doing some of this work. For some of you that know me, I've been doing this kind of work like for years. And I think that when I was like 16, 17, 18 years old, somebody put a camera in my hands, and I think that was like, I wasn't sure that when I started taking these pictures that 40, 45 years later I would be doing this kind of stuff. And so I've been able to preserve a lot of these photographs, and it's kind of funny because I'm always cracking on people. I actually send people emails saying memory lane, and in memory lane I sent pictures of them when they were like 20, 23, and they say, oh my God. So tonight I'm hoping to have the same kind of effect in this particular project. Now, I also want to reiterate that I am not an expert, and this is my disclaimer. I'm not an expert, I'm not an authority, I'm just another guy who has a passion to tell the story. And there's a bunch of folks here. As a matter of fact, I know Tomas Sanabria is here. He's actually used to take pictures at the same time that I used to take pictures. At that time, we used to probably be the only guys with a camera. So that was very important. Nowadays, I don't take pictures anymore because everybody's got a camera. Telephone, they got pen cameras, and the thing is, back in the days, I was telling people that you had to work to take a picture. You had to make sure you got the f-stop right, you got the speed right, you had to do all these dials. Nowadays, what you do is just shoot, and the camera does all, point, and the camera does all the work for you. You don't have to do anything else to it. And even kids, I actually was told the other day that you got to explain to the young generation what negatives and slides were, because they don't even have an idea what that is. So I'm saying, oh my God, we are getting old. So I wanted to point out, because I know that I've actually had written, rebuttals, in magazines. Whenever people write things, I'll put in my 2 cents in, and somebody will say, there goes Carlos Flores, sticking his fingers into this thing, thinking that he's the authority. I'm not the authority. I'm just one person that has this passion of telling the story, because let me tell you why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I'm doing this for my parents, and I'm doing this for all the people that came here, just like my parents did, who sacrificed and gave their beautiful life in that island to seek a better life. Because, the island's a beautiful place, but if you don't have the sources to feed and take care of family, you got to move on. And so basically, I do that for them, and I think that this story has not really been told yet. I'm also involved, or I want to thank the people that actually have done a little bit of work here and there. For example, there's a gentleman by the name of Manuel Martinez, who actually, again, in the same passion that I actually was involved, he actually self-published like 5,000 of these books. And if you have a copy, hold on to it, because you're not going to see it. And this is the guy that actually, many years ago, brought a coquí to Chicago. And people kept saying, coquís, yeah, Manolo. Coquís are, people say, oh, they don't live outside of Puerto Rico because they died. But, he had them here. The only thing is they didn't say coquí, so. So basically, Manolo, I went to his house. The guy was really, really an interesting guy. Every time, he would blow me away with things. I went to his house in Caguas to visit him. He took me to his bedroom. He showed me like this big kind of picture that was about that big, but real long. And it was a picture of the time that Muñoz Marin came and they had a banquet. And they had all these Puerto Rican leaderships in tuxedos. And I'm saying, Manuel, how do you do it? And he would always tell me, that is the secret. And so the guy actually had all these, he has all these televisions and radio by the Armand Sanabria, who was Puerto Rican, who actually studied in Indiana. He's one of the first people that actually invented television, because there was several people that actually were credited with inventing the television. So this guy from the Sanabria family is one of those people. Now, I also do this because I think that, it is important to, my work and the work of others is based on the passion to tell our community story in the spirit of inclusion. Today I'm concerned that individuals and organizations in our community do not share that same spirit of inclusion, and intentionally, for whatever reason, have begun the process of revising our history. That is very dangerous, and you as individuals must keep an eye on that situation and not allow that to manifest itself. My message to those individuals is that the Puerto Rican community is not represented by one monolithic voice. There's thousands of voices, and all those voices need to be heard. Because I think we have to be very careful that these folks are writing this history, and they're not including anybody, they're only including themselves. So that is an important message that I bring to you, because you see it already happening already, where you have individuals and organizations talking about the Puerto Rican community started like in 1980. I'm not going to mention no names or anything like that, because my life is very comfortable right now, and I don't want to be put on a hit list or anything like that. So that's basically it. But there's been a lot of bits and pieces of this history that has been written, but nothing has really been written yet. Now, we actually in June launched a project called the History Project of the Chicago Latino Coalition, and we actually launched the project in June. And we have a person here from the project that's actually filming for this project. We have started doing interviews, and basically, again, the story has not been told. The individual stories of, like our parents and your grandparents and so forth, that story has not been told. And I encourage each and every one of you to, if your parents are still alive or your grandparents are still alive, get a little tape recorder or a little video and sit down with them and start telling them, hey, Mom, Dad, Grandpa, tell me what you went through. Because Puerto Ricans, when they came here, just like any other immigrant or migrant, they faced some real difficult times. And so I'm hoping that with this exhibit, I will be able to tell you some of the things that actually went down. But Manuel Martinez is one of those people. I also wanted to talk about Tony Rizarri. He also has done some work in his book. It also kind of like a self-published. It kind of looks like a Yellow Pages, but it really is not. It's just, But there's a lot of great information in here that I've actually have gone to actually do some of my, my information gathering. Felix Padilla was one of the first guys who actually wrote a book called Puerto Rican Chicago. There's a lot of great information here about also the history of Puerto Ricans in Chicago. My friend, Wilfredo Cruz, actually published this book called Puerto Rican Chicago, and you can see that on the cover of this book, it's my photograph. And so I don't know if you guys have seen this. It's kind of like a photo book, and several of my photographs are in this book. So, and then we also have the film that actually this was released in 2008. It's called Chicago Puerto Ricans, and it's basically a video. And as I look at this video, there's a whole bunch of photographs of mine in here too. So I've actually been able to contribute a lot of this work to some of the people that are also doing the work. And again, these folks are doing it because they have a passion, and they're doing it in the spirit of inclusion. They include everybody, whether you like them or not, whether you like their politics or not, or whether you don't like, you like what they do or not. That's what the history is about. You got to include everybody. So with that, being told, all my displacement being told, let's go to the videotape. So now keep in mind that I feel like a weatherman here. I feel like I have to be looking at my screen and also have to be actually looking at the screen. Okay, this is a picture. This is like kind of like a lot of different pictures of different events that have taken place, and so some of these pictures are also repeated throughout the exhibit, throughout the presentation. Okay, first of all, I wanted to talk about a little bit about the migration to the United States. And basically, I think that before 1898 and 1898, before the end of the 19th century and also up to the mid 20th century, up to about 1966, that, there was a large migration of Puerto Ricans to the United States, including, and the reasons were either there was a natural disaster, the unemployment was high, the increased population, high poverty rates, were the reasons for Puerto Ricans leaving the island. I mean, I would have never left because, it's a beautiful place. But like I said, if you got a family, you got to feed the family. Now, thousands of Puerto Ricans migrated to Hawaii from 1900 to 1901. In 1917, the Jones Act was passed that declared Puerto Rican U.S. citizens. And shortly after that, the U.S. entered World War I. And ever since Puerto Ricans did not need a passport to travel to the United States after 1917. And Puerto Ricans, along with other Latino groups, participated in every and all of U.S. world conflicts. That means from Afghanistan all the way to World War I, Puerto Ricans have participated. In 1946 to 1966 was the great airborne migration of Puerto Ricans coming to the U.S. city, including Chicago. Before I go on, I also wanted to acknowledge some people. I had some mentors out here, and one of my mentors is this gentleman that just walked in. His name is Victor Parra. I want you guys to give Victor a hand. Victor has provided me with a lot of education, and next to him is this other gentleman, Juan Montenegro, who actually was also my kick buddy. He was my running mate. And we were terrorizing all kinds of places in the 70s. And Juan used to have a program called Latin Explosion that used to be on in the 1970s from 12 to 5 in the morning. I don't know how he did it. Every day from, I think, Monday to Saturdays? I was young. Yeah, that's what it was. I was involved with that too. And so there's some photographs. And then Victor has always been on the air. He's still on the show. He's on WDCB on Sundays from 3 to 5, right, Vic? So if you get a chance to listen to Victor, he's on Sunday evenings. But I've known these two gentlemen for a long time, and I figured that I'd give a shout out to them. And it's only appropriate to do that. My next exhibit, I actually wanted to talk to you about this thing with Hawaii. Now, when migrants leave, the place, like any immigrant comes to this country, they go through a lot of changes. Now, in Puerto Rico, one of the biggest migration was when they actually, in 1900 to 1901, there was like 5,000 Puerto Ricans that migrated from Puerto Rico they went by ship to Florida, by train to San Francisco, and by ship to Hawaii. So about 5,000 Puerto Ricans went. And a lot of them, were a lot of, peasants, who were not really educated, really weren't skilled. And that was because there was unemployment and there was a need for labor in Hawaii because of the pineapple season. So what they would tell people is that, we're just going to go around the island. And so they get on these ships and they go and they say, where the hell are you taking me? I want to go back home. So this is a story in the San Francisco Examiner in I think it was December 15, 1901, where this woman decided she didn't want to go. So they started taking her kid so they could get her on ships so she could go and get on the ship because of the fact that they, come on in folks, that they did not want to go through this. So they, this whole thing of the migration situation was very interesting. There's also, in 1902, talking about immigration and immigration issues, in 1902, the U.S. Treasury Department had they issued new immigrant guidelines that changed the status of all Puerto Ricans to foreigners. And this is after the invasion of Puerto Rico in 1898 as a result of the Spanish-American War. And so there's a woman by the name of Isabel Gonzalez who was a young single mother who was expecting a second child. Her fiancé, who was in New York, sent for her with the intentions of getting married. When she arrived in New York, she and all the Puerto Ricans who were with her were detained in Ellis Island and denied entry into the United States. And they were kept in Ellis Island just like immigrants. So she was accused of being an alien and as an unwed parent. She was deemed as a burden to the welfare system of this country. It sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? So Gonzalez challenged the government of the United States in the groundbreaking case of Gonzalez versus Williams. If you guys want to follow up and check on that. So what the Supreme Court ruled was that under the immigration laws, Gonzalez was not an alien and therefore could not be denied entry into New York. It also stated that Puerto Ricans were not U.S. citizens, they were non-citizens nationals. So they were allowed to come to the United States back then. So that's just an interesting thing that I wanted to point out. And again, I feel like a weatherman here trying to figure out how to get to the next. Okay, here we go. Puerto Ricans coming to New York, 1946. Where 500 Puerto Ricans arrived in New York, in Chicago, to work as domestic and foundry workers, mostly women. They were recruited by Castle and Barton Associates, a private employment agency. Woodlawn in the South Side was the first community the Puerto Ricans settled. In the 1950s and 1960s, they branched out to other North Side neighborhoods like Lincoln Park, Garfield Park, Westtown Humboldt Park, Lakeview, and others. Throughout the migration periods, Puerto Ricans always carry their musical traditions with them. Either they're in Hawaii, you still see second, third generation of Puerto Ricans still playing cuatro, which is what their parents brought with them. So they would always bring their musical tradition, and you figure that was the one way of how to overcome and deal with all the sadness that you have, because here you come to a place that you live in places like 82, 83 degrees, tropical weather, it's beautiful. And then you're going to come here, you're going to be dealing with snow, 12, 13, 14 inches of snow, cold weather, and then you couldn't speak, you were being segregated and discriminated against because you didn't speak the English, and you really felt unwelcome. So those are some of the things. So what people had was that they had their own music to keep them alive and keep them going. So by 1947, the Puerto Rican Catholic Society, which the Archdiocese of Chicago played a role in the assimilation of Puerto Ricans into the society in Chicago. By 1947, bear me with the notes here. In the late 40s and early 50s, the Chicago Roman Catholic Archdiocese was one of the several organizations that took the lead in providing services and counseling to help many Puerto Rican migrants make a smooth assimilation into the city's general population. By 1947, the Puerto Rican Catholic Society, Sociedad Católica Puertorriqueña, had been established and celebrated its first coronation dance in the facility of the Catholic Youth Organization. On May 1st, 1950, the Archdiocese assisted the publication of the first Puerto Rican newspaper called Borinquen, which was in 1947. Now, the my story is based on interviews that I conducted, photographs that I've taken, and also living, you know, some of these experiences with the music. And so you know, there's a really rich, interesting. Now, let me go to the next thing here. This is the first major Puerto Rican festival was held on June 24th, 1956, when the Caballeros of San Juan, Knights of St. John's, organized a Dia de San Juan festival in conjunction with the same holiday in the island. This festival was held at the Chicago Avenue Armory, which is presently the Chicago Museum of Contemporary Arts. And it featured the music of Tito Rodriguez, which is the band that's playing up there, orquestra, el Trio Vega Bajeño, and a Mexican comedian by the name of Pecas. Doña Felisa Rincon, the mayor of San Juan, was also present at this event, and 6,000 Puerto Ricans attended the festival back then. This was followed by a mass that they had at Holy Name Cathedral with all the, you know, Mayor Daley and all the political folks. And this is part of the process of contributing and developing in the community. So this gentleman you see in the center there, pretty slick dancing guy, that's Rafael Congo Castro, who is one of the, I mean, he came to New York like in 1912, 1916, and was a performer there, and then he ended up coming to Chicago in 1949, 48, and he had been here since, and he died here in Chicago. He's one of the people that I've actually interviewed, and some of the people that follow the music know about Rafael Congo. And then, you know, the music, the local Puerto Rican music scene can be traced to the late 40s when this guy, Rafael Congo Castro, traveled to Chicago for a week-long engagement in a downtown nightclub, playing along with percussionists with a West Indian show called a show calypso. Folks, you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait, I got some stuff for you guys. It's gonna blow you away. Okay, this is Doña Felisa Rincon with el Trio Vega Bajeño as part of the whole event of the Teatro of the San Juan. Then, in 1957, was when they, and I'm actually trying to, as I worked on this notes, I'm trying to figure out what the hell I did. I hope I'm not crossed up here and there. But I could actually tell this stuff, you know, without really looking at my notes. In 1957 was the second Dia de San Juan festival, and what they did is they brought the La Sinfónica de San Juan, directed by conductor Arturo Somojano, and soloist Carmencita Figueroa. The Dia de San Juan, there was Carmencita Figueroa, and there was another dancer, another singer. This was done at the St. Philip Stadium, which is somewhere in Kesley on the west side of Chicago. And that, you know, was part of the St. Philip High School back in 1957. And from talking to people, I was not here at the time. From talking to people, people were actually blown away because they didn't think that in Puerto Rico people listen or play classical music. And by the fact that this symphonic orchestra came with these singers singing, you know, Mozart, Bach, and all the classic music, just blew folks away, not knowing the history that Puerto Ricans, you know, have had, Puerto Rico and some of the other parts of the Caribbean, as a result of the Spanish influence, brought some great music programs, and we developed a lot of great musicians on the island. So I'm going to go right along. I'm looking at my notes, and my notes actually are throwing me off, but I'm going to go right along and go through the slide presentation here. Okay, this is like, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the, oh, by the way, the 1957, 10 years later, after 1956, the same festival became the Puerto Rican Parade Committee, the Puerto Rican Parade Festival. So it started in 1956, and 10 years later, it became, because it took away that power that the church was having, and some people decided, because I think that Asano Lopez became the first president, if I'm not mistaken, the first president of the Puerto Rican Parade, and Novoa, and somebody could help me out. Israel Novoa was the Grand Marshal for that first parade, because I have interviews with him. So I'll be asking you guys, because I know some of you guys are as old as I am, or as old as some of these folks, and you can help me out with this, but Israel Novoa was one of those folks. And so 1956 it became, and that's when the Puerto Ricans had the first Puerto Rican parade in downtown Chicago in June. Now, this is just pictures of nightclubs and performers in the 1950s. Entertainers back in the days. And again, Puerto Ricans were doing this, and it wasn't just Puerto Rican music. It was musicians. It was Puerto Rican musicians with Mexican musicians, African American musicians, white musicians. So we, Dominicans, Cubans. So it was a mix. It wasn't just Puerto Rican musicians playing what I call Afro-Cuban music or Afro-Latino music. Basically, that's exactly what a lot of these bands were playing. So you had people like Manny Garcia, who was Mexican, Pellín Rodriguez, who was also a singer, Armando Sanchez, and I actually misspelled Sanchez up there. Armando Sanchez, who was Cuban, Vitín Santiago, Puerto Rican, Rafael Congo Castro, and Victor Venegas. I'm going to talk a little bit about Victor Venegas, and I'm going to talk about Armando Sanchez, because those were two people that actually lived here in the late 40s and the 1950s and left Chicago and made a mark. As a matter of fact, Pellín Rodriguez left Chicago, came to Chicago in the 1950s. He used to sing with the Nora Morales group. And he actually worked here in factories. From what I understand, from what people told me, he was a factory worker. And he used to sing, you know, after his gig. And he actually left here to go sing with the Gran Combo. And he sang with the Gran Combo for many, many years. And here we have Vitín Santiago. As a matter of fact, Vitín told me his story how he got here. He came here in the 1950s to perform with Daniel Santos. And Daniel Santos had an engagement for a month, and so Daniel got into a fight with the nightclub owner, and so, you know, he left, and so he left Vitín and the band. So some of the band members left. Vitín decided to stay. Him and this piano player by the name of Tony Muriel decided to stay in Chicago, and he had been here ever since. So, and then he actually bought some clubs and so forth. And that's a picture of Rafael Congo Castro when he used to sing, dance with this woman named Chela. This is in 1939 in New York. And so he died on September 14, 1990. Now, some of the clubs back in the days, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, the Cuban Village, the Palladium, the Glass Hot Cocktail Room, the Congress Hotel, Mambo City, Club de Lisa, Sonora Nightclub, El Mirador, which was on Roosevelt and near Halsted, and I think Victor spent some time there at the Mirador back in the late 50s. And the Mirador was owned by Cesar Dovalina, who actually also passed away, who actually was an entrepreneur, business person. The what? No, you could ask the question. Right, he was married to Mina Salazar, who was one of the queens of the Puerto Rican parade. The first one. Yes. There's just so much history. I can only cover so much. And as a matter of fact, I've written articles about the Puerto Rican community, which is another discussion for another lecture for another day. But today we're just covering the musical part. Okay, here's an interesting thing, and I know that you remember this, folks. I want to talk a little bit about the Cruz family, because, you know, back in the days, 1946, 1947, 1946, Puerto Ricans began arriving here, and a lot of them, you know, didn't speak English, couldn't really go to, you know, places that were not welcome. So we had all these entrepreneurs that came and also provided services to people. So we had the Cruz family. We had Carlos and Rafael Cruz, who were the founders of Café Central and also La Voz Hispana. And those two establishments are still alive. They found those two establishments like in the early 50s. In Laura's the widow of Rafi. What year did they start? 52, 53? Yeah. I know your late husband gave me, I did an interview for NPR one time, and we talked about all this stuff. So these two businesses are still here. La Voz Hispana is still at 2514 North Laramie, and Café Central is still at 1437 West Chicago Avenue. So these were like two restaurants and places that were actually, I could actually use this as a pointer. What do you think about that? But anyway, so yeah, these were also two pioneers that actually contributed to this history. Let's see. Okay, some of the musicians, and as a matter of fact, I talked to Victor this morning because I want to talk about musicians with Chicago connection. And Pablo, whose name was Eddie Payo, and Mary Alicea had a group called La Playa Sextet. And La Playa Sextet was also one of the groups that Tito Rodriguez recorded with. Now, Mary Alicea, from my understanding, she was raised and born in Chicago. And Mary, Pablo, back then, and then they went to New York and formed this band. I was going to try to get some clips for the music, but then I decided that I'm not that technically savvy to learn how to download music like that. So, but I'm learning. Here's some other musicians with Chicago connections. Armando Sanchez was, again, I mentioned Armando Sanchez was Cuban. He actually recorded several albums, and he and Victor Venegas hooked up in the late 1940s, 1950s, because Victor Venegas was Mexican-American, and Armando was Cuban, and Victor used to play with a lot of different bands, and he ended up going to New York and ended up, I mean, if you look at his history, you'd be amazed at all the recordings that he did. He played with Mongo, Cal Jader, he recorded with Pacheco, with Celia, you name it, he worked with all of them. And so here's Victor Venegas performing with Mongo Santa Maria. He was the bass player for Mongo Santa Maria. He actually grew up in Chicago. So it's just another Chicago connection. Let me see. Okay. Here's another interesting musicians with Chicago connection. Cheito Gonzalez was he was a crooner. He was a bolerista. Had a great voice, had great music, and he recorded a couple of albums. As a matter of fact, Danny Rivera actually recorded an album in honor and in tribute of Cheito Gonzalez. Cheito Gonzalez died on December 10, 1962. I think he died of an overdose, and he was found in a car here in Chicago. So he had a very tragic life, and he died at a very young age. Benjamin Rodriguez, as I mentioned to you, worked in New York. He sang with many groups, including Noro Morales, the famous pianist. But he ended up coming to Chicago in the 1950s, played with different bands. I think he played with the Manny Garcia band, if I'm not mistaken, at the Mirador. And from here, he went to play with the Gran Combo. And this is one of the album covers from the Gran Combo. There you see Andy Montañez and Pellín, who were the two lead singers. Huh? El Boogaloo album, right. The Boogaloo album. So, and there was many other albums that he recorded. Okay. I got to get my, okay. You need an assistant? Okay. This is, no, I'm fine. This is an interesting story. This is the guy by the name of Miguel Mike Marrero. And they actually named him Malaret because Malaret, I think the Miss Universe in Puerto Rico in the 70s or 80s. So I think that because he was very light-skinned, they ever said, oh, you know, you look like a cousin, or they were a cousin. I don't know how the story went. But anyway, they call him Mikey Malaret, Marrero. So Mike, and again, you see some of my typos in there, performed. He grew up in Chicago, and he ended up, got recruited here in Chicago, and he performed with the Gran Combo from 1970 until his untimely death. Why, I didn't even know I did so many errors on my typos. That's what happens when you're like at 3 in the morning trying to stack stuff. So Mikey played with the Gran Combo from 1970 to 1982. He was the timbalero for the band. And he actually died of an untimely death because of the fact that he went in for minor surgery and never came out. And so that's how he died. But he actually, you see him on the pictures here, he recorded several albums. This is Mikey right there. And he recorded on many of the albums for like 11, 12 years when he played with the Gran Combo. Okay, here's the part that I'm real proud of because I want to show you what Puerto Rican teenagers growing up in Lincoln Park were dancing to in the mid-1960s. And if you look real closely, you're going to see this black kid. As a matter of fact, I've gotten a lot lighter. I think that the many winters in Chicago have made him skin, but you can't miss me. I'm in the center dancing, and the clip that you're going to see is a clip that was part of a documentary which is called Why Can't We Be the Good Guys Sometimes? And it was released in 1966. And Jim Conway, who was a news anchor for ABC News back in the 60s is the person who narrates this thing. And it's a whole story about Puerto Ricans coming to Chicago as a new migrant. And so it focuses on the Lincoln Park community, because that was the community I grew up in. I grew up on Larrabee, I grew up in that whole area on Armitage. And so this particular clip that I took out of the documentary, if you go to the Museum of Contemporary Arts, you ask for the film, Why Can't We Be the Good Guys? And you'll see the whole documentary. And it's got folks there from 1965, 64. And so this clip that I'm going to show you, it's got us as teenagers dancing. And if you look closely, you're going to see me in the center doing this thing. So I actually dubbed some music. I dubbed some of the music from the exhibit. I dubbed a song by the name of Woody Bully by Sandra Chan, and also Mickey's Monkey by Smokey Robinson. So check this out. Nope. Here we go. Okay, I'm gonna. I know they brought back a lot of memories because you saw people in there like, I don't know if you guys remember Angie. She died a couple of years ago. She used to have a club called Rico's. And it was kind of interesting because back in the days when we were teenagers, again, it was an integrated setting. You know, it was not only Puerto Rican kids, there were Mexicans, there were like Italian kids, and that's, you know, we grew up in Lincoln Park. And this was at a place called Immaculate Conception, which is a church on North Park. And we used to have Friday night sack house. And it's kind of interesting because they had the priest watching, making sure that everybody behaved. But we would go outside and, drinking our wine and messing around. And it was an interesting situation, but it was well organized. And you also saw that we had, I know David talked about a gang sweater. There was no such thing as gangs back in the days. They were like clubs. And so we had a club called the Continentals. Back in the days, there was a club called the Young Lords, the Paragons, the Black Eagles. And so we all hung out together. It wasn't this thing about territory, and there was no rivalry. And so we all, kind of hang out together. Now, the interesting thing about this is that we're listening to Smokey Robinson, the Impressions, listening. The band that was playing there was a band by the name of Mike Martinez and the Mustang. It was a rock and roll band. And so some of the young Puerto Rican kids and Latino kids were actually into the rock and roll music, and they were actually involved, listening to interesting things. Now, when you went home, you were listening to Chorolo, you were listening to Puente, you were listening to all kinds of different things. So it was kind of like a nice way of just growing up in terms of getting exposed to all this different culture and this different music. So that, I was very proud that I actually had an opportunity to experience that in my life. So I knew that you guys were going to enjoy that.
Carlos, how were you able to contain that clip all these years?
Well, basically, I'm probably one of the few people that has a copy of the video, and so I actually cheated in a way, because I know that. But the thing is, I'm not harming anybody, so you can sue me, whatever you can get from me. That's. But I didn't get permission from the museum. I actually took it and I downloaded it to my computer just for this presentation. I just wanted to show the effects. But the whole video in itself, it's got people in there like Mario's Food. There used to be a grocery store called La Plaza Grocery Store, where a lot of people would go and buy La Bodega. And it's kind of interesting with La Bodega, is you go in and the guy will keep a book, and you would say, I'm going to buy food and I'll pay you next week. So it was a credit way of doing things. But again, these business people and these entrepreneurs were the ones that were providing services to our people who didn't speak the language and were able to make their comfort, feel a little bit at home, more or less. Now, again, back in those days, it's kind of interesting because the day that they had the first Puerto Rican parade, the first day, 1966 in June, right after the parade, we had these riots. 1966 riots. A lot of people say, well, those were negative, it's bad, it gave a black eye to the Puerto Rican community. But you know what? I see it differently. I think to me it was like a rude awakening. It was a whole opportunity, and it did work because it gave city officials, it actually put them on notice that there is a group of people called Puerto Ricans, Latinos here, and that we should not be neglected. And we were being treated like second-class citizens. There was a lot of discrimination, a lot of racism, a lot of police brutality. And so, our parents were concerned with just coming to work, not starting any trouble. They were very, we're kind of docile. They go to work, come back. But the young people who were growing up there, didn't, we were not taking that stuff. And what happened was that this whole riot began as an altercation with a police officer and a young man right about a block from where I live on Crystal and Damon. And the whole neighborhood went up in arms, and there was like at one time there was as many, the riot went all the way from Ashland all the way to California. That's how big the Puerto Rican community was back in 1966 in that area. And there were reports, I did the research. I've been researching all this stuff of all the newspaper clippings, and and one of the reports says that there was like 10,000 Puerto Ricans rioting out there. And the interesting thing is that this happened right after Watts, maybe 10 months after Watts, and so city officials were getting prepared to deal with the African American community because there was a lot of discontent. A lot of the African American communities are, not taking this stuff anymore. And as a matter of fact, there's a history project that I mentioned earlier, which is a history project of the Chicago Latino Coalition. I did an interview a couple of months ago on WBON with one of the people, and we talked about how the city of Chicago was actually placing like holding tanks in the Chicago Park districts, like in Garfield Park, just in case something break out, they would, lock them up and put them there. But they were shocked when the Puerto Ricans erupted. And so when the Puerto Ricans created this riot, to me it was like a new beginning, because it actually, we were no longer saying give us, we were now demanding. And there was a big difference. So, a lot of organizations came out, a lot of new leadership came out. And so it was an interesting thing, because the group of the young lawyers came out. There was another group that was one of these groups that was actually fighting against gentrification in our community, who were being pushed out, just like what happened in Wicker Park and what's happening in Humboldt Park today. And so it was an interesting beginning, because I think it actually let folks know what the, I'm trying to get this thing. I actually have a little clip. There was a guy by the name of, let's see if I can, Simon Gomez, who actually, where's my cursor? I actually have a little, okay, here we go. Okay, Simon, nah, it's not what I want. I gotta go back to see. Technical problems. Okay. Okay, Simon Gomez was visiting Chicago, and he was in Indiana, and in Chicago, and he wrote a decima about the riots. I just want you to listen to a little bit about how, and this thing has never really been heard, and he recorded the whole thing. You see, this is the corner of Damon and Division. That building is still up. So this is the extent of what was going on back there. And people were angry because, there was a lot of racism, a lot of discrimination, a lot of brutality that was taking place. And so a lot of things came out of this. We began, hiring police officers, began, getting services in the community. So I don't say that it was a really negative thing that these riots took place. I'm going to go to the next. Okay. The Teatro San Juan. I want to talk a little bit about it. And my whole presentation is based on all those individuals who actually contributed to making sure that the music was kept alive, the music was being exposed. I was having a discussion with a lady in the back, and when I was growing up, I grew up, there used to be several theaters. There was a guy by the name of Charlie Gomez, who actually had an enterprise. He was Mexican. He used to run all these theaters. And in the theaters, they would have the films, and then they would have live music. And so, they had El Teatro San Juan, El Teatro Cene, Galletti, Atlantic, and the Plaza. The Plaza was located in North Avenue near Sedgwick. And let me tell you, I was an expert on Mexican films. That's all I saw. I know about Tony Aguilar, Pedro Infante, Tintán, Cantinflas, Jorge Negrete. Used to watch all those films. And, including there's a guy, a little short guy by the name of Joselito. I don't know if you guys remember him. Yeah, he was like, I used to go watch all his movies. So this was some of the things that we used to do like in the 60s. And then you would have, this one way of connecting people back to the island in terms of giving them, opportunities to listen to the music. Okay, these are some pictures that I took in 1980, 81 in the Teatro San Juan. And these are some of the shows that they would have. You would have Ramito, Jose Miguel Class, Odilio Gonzalez, and you would have people like Felipe Rodriguez. I know Arsenio Rodriguez, who lived in Chicago for maybe about a month, also did the circuit with the theaters. And that was part of, you know, giving people live performances and also an opportunity to see live music. And as a matter of fact, growing up in that community, I wanted to point out that I went to St. Michael's High School. And back at St. Michael's High School, the lady who just applauded, we used to have a basketball team. We had two cheerleaders that are here, Maria Rodriguez and Laura. They were cheerleaders. They were the very fine cheerleaders. Very fine cheerleaders back in the days. But we all grew up. This is just some of the stuff that was going on back then. This is, again, Chicago Spanish television was another, and so I know if Tony sees this, he's going to kill me. I never authorized you to do this, but growing up as a kid, when television first came on the scene, Channel 26, we used to watch, I remember this one novela called Simplemente Maria. Simplemente Maria, that was a hit. Everybody go watch that. You know, even me, I would go watch Simplemente Maria. But you know, they had a novela that actually dealt with the whole issue of racism, which is and the Derecho de Nacer, which kind of dealt with the whole issue of, but they never tell you how she got involved with this black man that had the baby. All I know is that they gave the baby, and I don't know if he was a black man or not, but they gave the baby to the servant, and the servant racist kid, and you know, the whole drama through the whole novela, you know, and then at the end he finds out that that's his mother, and you know, all the tears and all that other stuff. But on television, you had Tony Quintana, who used to have a show, I think it was on Thursday night from 9 to 10, and he used to have a piano player by the name of Kike Orchard. And there was just Tony, and sometimes he would have a guest, sometimes I would have to turn the channel because you could take so much of the stuff. Don't tell Tony that, but it was Tony, and then you had, here you have pictures of Tony Quintana with Bobby Capó and Vitín Santiago. And it's kind of interesting because I know as we talk a little later about the preparation of musicians in terms of how equipped and skilled some of the musicians that we have today and some of the people that contributed to creating these opportunities for young musicians here in Chicago to be able to go ahead and play. Back in the days, Vitín Santiago told me in an interview that he had a lot of problems finding musicians to perform with people like internationally known Bobby Capó, because Bobby, what he would say, I'm going to send the arrangements. And Vitín couldn't find a lot of musicians who know how to read. And so that was a lot of the problems. And so that was one of the causes. I mean, I'm sure that there were musicians that could read, but for his particular club, because Vitín had a club and so did Tony. Tony had a club called La Habana San Juan, which is right on Belmont and Sheffield. And so so the whole story about television, around my video. You see, some of these folks are better than I am. So you know, TQ was on the air, and then you had a guy, Don Canuto, who used to do the novelas. And then the most incredible guy that I used to freak out was Turín Acevedo. Turín Acevedo looked like a villain. He was like, Turín Acevedo used to wear these dark glasses, you know, and I was wondering, why is he wearing dark glasses on TV? And I never saw him, but people told me that this guy was cross-eyed this way. And so he never really wanted to show. I mean, I hate to talk about people like that. But those who actually saw him could tell you. And so, you know, he would come on and he says, you know, I want to thank the sponsor. And then when he get ready to announce the telenovela, he said, ahí está. So that was part of the whole growing up in the television. And then television has come a long way since then. Am I taking you guys on memory lane here? Okay. Okay, dancing venues. you know, dancing venues, you know, like La Concha, you know, this is like places that I grew up in. This is like, that's Tanya's, the Tanya's Club, and I think you probably recognize some of the folks that are there. I'm not even going to mention the names, but that's Tanya's. But in the 1970s, this is when I used to run with, that's Jaime up there, right? When I used to run with Juan and New Victor, you know, we had a routine that we, and I don't know if Juan remembers this, but we used to go work out in the health club. You know, we had a couple of buddies who were going to law school, and we work out at the university. I don't know how we got in, but we used to work out, and then we would actually go out and party every night. Every night there was a party going on, you know, like either at the down on Rush Street. What was the name of that place on Rush Street? The Happy Medium. The Happy Medium. We would go to on Mondays. We go to the Acapulco with Victor, and then when I was going to college, we were broke. So La Concha was the place that we used to hang out, and La Concha was smoking because every one of these clubs back in the days had live music. Yes.
Is Golden Tiara the now big old hall?
Yeah. Right. As a matter of fact, there's a poster that I have. Yeah. So you know, we used to hang out. You know, we used to go to college. We were broke, had no money, and what Ramon Suchet would do, he was the owner of La Concha, he would make us wait outside until about 12, 1 o'clock. And you had Adaniera, you had the Tropical Magic that was owned by Jorge Perez, which is on Rockwall and Fullerton. Night and day, you had the Acapulco, then the big places were the Aragon and the International Ballroom and the Golden Tiara. Those were the 70s and the 80s. Then the 80s and the 2000s was Tanya's, Cass, Excalibur, and things began to change because I think that in the 1980s, 1990s, right around that period, things began to change. The economy got a little hard. Some people decided that, you know, they'd rather go downtown because it was safer to go downtown. And so a lot of the clubs began to open downtown. Like, you know, you would go on Monday night and do the Moosehead with Victor's band. And it was an early set. It was like from 6 to 10. You would do the Hot House, you would do Intas, and you would do all that. I know I'm bringing back some memories. And again, I'm not including everybody because you probably guys have a lot of memories back then. But these were some of the places that were offering dancing. Nowadays, what you have is musicians are not working anymore. You know, there's probably a handful of musicians that are working. And basically, a lot of the music is dependent on DJs. And so it's not the same. And I know that I make comments that, you know, I don't go out dancing anymore because for me to go dancing, I got to wear my armor so I don't get hurt on the dance floor. But that's just another joke, and I better just shut up and leave it as it is right there. I don't want the dance instructors getting on my ass. Excuse me the French. Okay. Okay, this is one of the, I know the EBIRAC and Caribes group organization, the Puerto Rican Congress, recorded several albums with Ramito, Pedro Flores, La Justicia, and so forth. But this is really like the first group that really actually recorded. I think in 1969 it was Shori Ramirez, and I think Edwin Tarzan and his group also had recorded. And I was going to try to get a clip of this, but couldn't do it. I didn't know the technology how to do it. But you probably see, as a matter of fact, there's a gentleman right there. His name is Juan Perez. And his brother Angelo used to play bass, and Juan used to play piano. And Juan is married to the husband of Margarita Perez, who's she owns this big company downtown. They do a lot of investment company. And so this was the band back in the days, and they started pretty good back in the days. So, okay. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the jam sessions. Back in the 60s and 70s, because that's what the riots also created, was the riots created creating this whole thing about pride. And so, you know, when the Boogaloo era came out, and those of us who were listening to Smokey Robinson's impression, the Boogaloo era came out, Johnny Colon, and people were singing Spanish and English music. a lot of the younger people began to start listening to the Latin music, Willie Colon and all the other folks. And so you know, there was this whole pride though. So everywhere you go in the community, anywhere you go, you had this thing called bembe, a jam session. People carried their drums and they just started the thing up. This is like the statue, right, on Sacramento near Division, right across from the flower spot. So these guys used to get together, you know, all you needed was drums, maracas, and a guido, and they would just jam all day long before the festivals were along. And you would see this everywhere, just about. Here's another jam session, also in Humboldt Park. This, you know, they used to get big gatherings. I'm just going to show you the picture of someone here. You see that gentleman right there? That's Paloma. Oh, yeah. That's Paloma. That's a young Paloma right there. Back in the days, probably 1971, 72. And I was glad I was there with the camera, you know, taking pictures. Again, there weren't too many people taking pictures back in those days. So.
How did you start, Carlos, with the camera?
It's a long story, but the way it goes is that I think I got kicked out of every high school that I went to. I'm a GED baby. Even St. Michael's, I never got to finish. I got. She knows my story, man. She knows my story. I got kicked out. I'm not gonna go into the details as to why I got kicked out. But back in the days, there was the whole thing with the turmoil in this country, and so they had a program at Argonne National Laboratory that was actually offering opportunities to urban minority young people. And so they had a group of about 25, 30 people, and I actually signed up. And what we do is that we would get paid for going and taking classes in the morning. No, we would take classes in the afternoon to get our GED, and in the morning we would work in one of the labs. So I chose to work in the photography lab, and so the people in the lab embraced me. They gave me cameras, they gave me film, and I got all turned on to this stuff. And so I would go in the community taking pictures. I got pictures of almost everybody here. And so people in my community would tell me, what, you're not going to take my picture today? Because I was taking pictures of everybody. And so right now I'm in the process of cataloging some of this stuff, which is like, again, I don't get the kind of funding that a lot of the organizations, you know, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, and I mean, I don't even get the funding. I mean, I could use some help in terms of cataloging the thousands and thousands of negatives that I have that tell a story about our community. And so that's how I got started, you know. So they gave me like a 2¼ camera, and I began taking pictures. I had pictures of her when they were like little kids, 10, 11, 12 years old. So that's how I got started with the film. Then I took some classes with Barbara Crane at the Art Institute. This thing is really a kind of pain. I just go here. Okay, here at Jam Sessions and Bembe's Festival. This is like, we used to have picnics at Milwaukee and Devon, at the actual woods. And you know, we would have the steel drum, or we would have a band. And it's kind of interesting, because back in the days, the boleros, let's just bring the bolero back, because that was a great tool. That was a great tool of actually like saying, yeah. Can you imagine dancing boleros in 91-degree weather, all sticky and everything? And they're just like pushing it in. I mean, and you know, these people have no shame. They just close their eyes and just be dancing. You know, so like, but you know, nowadays, you know, this is a style of music that you don't see anymore. But it was a great way that you saw a lady across the room and you say, I'm gonna go, and you break the ice and you take her out to dance. And then you would know right away whether or not you guys are going to connect or not, because then you start. Yes. Boathouse, you'll see that that's La Justicia right there performing. I think La Justicia's there. And I think the gentleman here, I forgot his name. Emilio was a trombone player in the band back in the days. This is me, believe it or not. I used to play and I play. I still have my vibraphone. This is with a group called Cheitos and Trabuco back in the days. And And so, but I'm not that great of a player. You know, I just, you know, I'm kind of like a shower singer and stuff like that. This is a group called La Propia. As a matter of fact, you know who this is? Yeah, that's Joe Proud, the bass player. He used to play with you, Vic, at one time. Yeah. There was a band called La Propia back in the days. This is at the Fullerton Beach. You know, you go to, you know, we used to hang out at the Fullerton Beach. This guy, I think he retired. He was a bus driver. And, you know, again, you take the congas and drums, you go out to the beach and you just play and just jam all day long. Now, this is an area that I feel that needs to be studied. And I'm hoping that, you know, the younger generation would actually look into this whole situation. Now, you know, you have the Club Michoacan here in Chicago today that helps out people in their own towns, the Mexican Club. But back in the days, we had all these like social clubs that actually created a great service to a lot of the folks that would come from the island. You know, when someone was going to go to Chicago, they would say, well, go to Los Hijos de Caguas, go to Los Hijos de San Lorenzo, and they would help you out. And that's what people would do. And these clubs were like non-for-profit. They were self-sustained. They were not getting no grants or any money. They had their own boards and their own people. And a lot of people would actually come and check them out. So in the 1950s and 60s, you had a bunch of them. You had the Puerto Rican Congress, was one of the first groups that was actually established. You had the Puerto Boricua, which was part of the 1246, established in the early 50s, the American Legion. You had a Comité Cívico Hispano, La Casa Puerto Rico, which was established in the early 50s, El Club Social Familiar, founded in 63rd and Woodlawn. You had Club Los Piñolanos from Piñones, Los Hijos de Yauco, Los Hijos de Moca, and so forth. And then in the 60s, you had these other ones, you know, Los Hijos de Padilla. And what these folks would do is they would actually also participate in the parades, the Puerto Rican parade. And I'm going to show you these pictures because I think that if you compare what the parades, how the parades were being done back in those days, when we used to march on State Street, they were really, really beautiful sight to see. Nowadays, I'm a little disappointed with the way the parades have turned out. You know, it's just a lot of commercialism, and you know, it becomes a 1.5 hour, you know, Pepsi Bud kind of thing. And again, I'm very critical. I'll call it for what it is. I'm not going to get fired or you know, get fined or anything like that. But these are some of the floats that some of these groups would have. Wait, okay. Okay, this is like La Social de Ponce, and this is like the. As a matter of fact, I know that the young lady who actually was the queen, and it was Nerida Morales. She was the queen back in the days, 1971. This is like La Sociedad de Vega Bajena, and they would actually have this beautiful procession. Each social club would have a queen, and they would have their queen, and they would parade her down State Street. Here you have Los Hijos de Tutuado. You see how beautiful the parades were. Los Hijos de Caguas, and you had, you know, bands, local bands playing. This is Los Hijos de Nahuabo. Los Hijos de Lares, with the Lares flag, and so basically there was this pride of you know, being from a town and being able to show, which is missing in some of the stuff that we see today in the parade. And I think that it's driving a lot of the young generation also of their history of what, you know, their parents and grandparents went through. This is like the Boricua Post. They also had their floats on there. I don't know who that is. Sidra? Yeah. And so that's what the things. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Chicago local Puerto Rican bands, Puerto Rican Latino bands. The 1960, this is the group called Conjunto Rio Platense, around 1960. And I believe that this gentleman right here, that's Mike Maldonado, who used to sing with the 911 Orchestra. His uncle was the leader of this band, and he just arrived in Chicago in the early 60s. But this is one of the groups that, back in the 60s, the way that when we were kids, they would have, you know, the Caballeros de San Juan would have these concilios. Each parish would have a concilio, and they would have parties. And you have gangs like Los Macaeños, you would have La Gran Sonora, you have those kind of bands. And that's, you know, as kids were there with dancing. I know I say Mike because they used to have the dances in the church. And so you would see all these groups back in the days, and this is one of the, it's a great photo shot of this group. This is La Sonora Rítmica Orchestra in the 1960s, and you see the guy here in the front, that's Rafael Congo Castro. And as a matter of fact, I think that we have a guy who's actually filming here, Edwin. It's your uncle, right?
No.
That's his uncle, who actually used to play saxophone, right? Trumpet. He was a trumpet player back in the early 1960s.
Where is this taken?
You know what? I don't know. I actually got this from Rafael Congo Castro. I don't know where that was.
Looks like the Chateau Royale in Chicago. And Chicago.
This is a group called Felipe y la Gran Sonora. And Felipe y la Gran Sonora, they would have the parades that would come down Division Street to perform. And Felipe is the guy who's playing the trumpet on the right side. And that was his band. This is some of the Chicago local Puerto Rican gay Latino band. This is a group from the Puerto Rican Congress. They have their academy. That's Joe's dad, Caribe, with one of the groups. I think that's La Unión, right? La Solución? Yeah, La Solución. That's La Solución, right? And so they, this is part of the albums that they first recorded. The groups they had were La Justicia, La Unión, La Inspiración, La Solución, Típica Leal. I think it was one of your groups. And La Juventud. And this is a picture that I was telling Emilio that there he is right there. And I don't know if you remember that day. But I went, and Chino Ramos is there, Chino and Chino's, all these folks. Luis Angel, the bike player. And so that's Emilio. This is a guy, what was his name? He was a Sandy. Okay.
He's the son of Sandy. His name is Santiago.
Okay. This is part of the Chicago Típica Lesson there with musicians like Mike Rivera, who went on to become, like great musicians. That's Angel Melendez from the 911 Orchestra. And in this band, you also had Edwin Sanchez, who was a piano player, performing with this band. This is Victor Parra and the Mambo Express playing at here was, I think it was the Chicago Fest, and Mongo Santa Maria had played. And so there's a guy here by the name of Steve Berrios who played with Mongo. He came in and he sat in with the band. This is Cortijito. It's Chilo Perez, who was Victor's bass player. This is, what was his name? Willie Negron. Connie, Victor, and Alfie. Alfie also played. So, this is a group called La Nativa, which actually had Gene and Gilberto and some of the singers from the day. This is up on the north side, up near Wrigley Field. They were playing outdoors. This is La Justicia, La Confidencia, Richie Striker, and you see Mike Maldonado, the late Mike Maldonado, who was a singer with the band. This is La Orquesta Nova. These are orchestras that were playing at any given moment. You will see, this is a great piano player named Facio, also a Mexican-American who played with the band. This is Raul. You see him a lot at La Bruguena, Raul Timbal. Mike was the leader. And this is at the Latin Village. This right here. You guys remember the Latin Village? This is an interesting thing. This is like the Chicago History Museum back in 1995 created a program to honor the Puerto Rican musicians, and what they did is they honored the soneros. And here you have four of the soneros that have been around for a long time. You have Mike Maldonado, you have Tino, who I don't know what his real name was, Tino, but Tino used to play with Manuel y sus Estrellas. You have Vitín, and you have Diego El Cieguito, who were all singers back in those days. So this is at the Chicago History Museum in 1995. And now, today you have bands like Angel Melendez and the 911 Orchestra. You have Papa Santiago and Infraverde. I still have a lot of faith, because I think that the tradition is still being maintained. Puerto Rican tradition, Puerto Rican music. This is a Grupo Yuba playing at Eddie Samuel is on here. I make sure that I got everybody in these pictures with his daughters, and they actually performing. So, there's a whole movement about bomba music. We have several groups in the community right now that are trying to keep the young people connected and intact. We also have the Cuatro Orchestra that actually has been, got established right before we actually did the first Cuatro Festival. And this group has come a long way. David and Orlando Rivera have done an enormous job in terms of teaching people about the Cuatro Orchestra. I mean, even, things have changed drastically in terms of dancing, because again, the whole thing about, at one time, the music was known as, rumba or go mambo, cha-cha-cha. Now they've actually simplified it. They call it this one word. I don't know what they call it. I don't use that in my vocabulary, but that's what they call it. I think it starts with an S. So everything is S. Okay? But back in the days, they were known by different names, and I think that to sell records and to sell music to people that didn't speak the language, that's how they came up with this word S. And the word S doesn't mean anything. It just means what you put in the food. That's my statement right there. Don't report me, but I know I'll get a lot of flack. And then nowadays, you go to Humboldt Park, or you still have this jam session in Penn Bay. I actually captured this last year. Every Sunday afternoon, you go to Humboldt Park, and they're still jamming. They corrido. They've been jamming for years. I mean, I have a whole thing I haven't interviewed the guy who actually founded the corrido. So you see, it's a whole rich history, and I'm actually just giving you a glimpse of what was taking place. Rich history that has not been written, and I'm hoping that I could contribute, some of you have contributed, but I'm hoping that some of the young folks eventually will come and really do an extensive history, capture of what really went on through all these years. And made it through, so that was it. I want to tell you, I didn't go through my notes. I actually know this stuff. I don't know why the hell I wrote notes. I had spent a lot of sleepless nights working on this stuff. But I'm open for questions if anyone has any questions or remarks.
Amazing.
Very good. Excellent.
Yes, Aaron.
So at the time, when the 60s, when all this was going on, in the Puerto Rican community, of course, there was a lot of great R&B and soul being recorded in Chicago, of course, played. Was there a lot of contact between Puerto Rican musicians and the Chicago soul R&B musicians in Chicago in the 60s?
Yeah, there was musicians that were actually playing, like Gilberto Diaz. He had trumpet players that were African Americans who played all over, and maybe Victor could also add to this. Were there African Americans that actually were playing back in the days? He used some too. He used Hawkins.
There was everybody played everybody. If you could play, you could read. Especially most of the horn players were either white dudes or black dudes.
Yeah, but what was the guy's name? Hawkins, with the trumpet player that. Hawkins was his name?
Oh, Steve Hawkins.
Steve Hawkins was one.
Much later.
But he came much later. But there were other people before that.
There was Ray Orr. They used to call him Chicle.
Mm-hmm.
Because he played the horn trumpet and he chewed gum.
Okay.
And there always did, and that was it. So they used to call him Chicle.
Yeah.
And he worked with in La Concha with
Gilberto.
And a lot of other big, they were mostly jazz musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of jazz musicians made a living playing both circuits. Because there was a time when jazz was dead. And there wasn't much work. So they worked in Latin groups. Same thing in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how, plus they could read.
Yeah. And also, the rhythm and blues music, we were all following. We were, the same way we were doing this rock and roll with Sam DeSham, we were listening to Smokey Robinson, we were listening to Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions, we were listening to the Temptations, Marvin Gaye. Oh, and the comment that I forgot to make, which is I actually have written a note. I wanted to start out by saying that music is such an interesting thing that it's with us throughout our life, even at the point of conception. At the point of conception, I think that some of us were created listening to either Tito Rodriguez, Ma and Pow, Got Into a Night, or we're listening to, with Marvin Gaye. So, you know, yeah, right. That's what it is, conception. You know, I'm tired. Yeah, I have a note out here talking about music, the conception. It starts the conception. So we, huh? What? No drawings. No drawings. I just put a note on here. I'm a little tired, but I wanted to make a comment about that, you know, we listen to music all the way through. You know, grandma putting us to sleep, birthdays, weddings, baptismal, throughout. And then even when you die, when they're taking your casket into that church, you hear the organ music. So music is music throughout life, man. And music is a wonderful thing for everybody, for every people. So, any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, one more. By the way, oh, Maria has a question.
What do you access when you go into Puerto Rican, Chicago?
Okay, Puerto Rican, Chicago, I've been working on this website. Like I said, I'm actually doing this thing by myself. You know, don't get any money, whatever I do, when I get time to do it. And this thing costs money. I have a bunch of galleries. Like, I have like 12 galleries that actually have photographs, a lot of these photographs. And I also wrote articles that explain to you what was going on at that time. And so I want to be able to do a lot more, but I haven't been able to do it because I'm still documenting and doing. So that's what you see. And I'm actually right now, I just got a new server, and I'm actually trying to put it out, but you know, keep an eye on it because eventually I will, you know, and I actually email people. So if there's any movement on it, you'll see some of the stories about I mean, I had an exhibit, I think that the first event that the Puerto Rican Art Salons had, we had it at the horse stable. We had an exhibit called The Puerto Ricans in Chicago. And there was like an 80-piece exhibit of my work. And so that was done back in 2001, right, 2000? Anyway, I actually also, I sell these things, but you know what, I'm not selling tonight. I want to make sure that each one of you get a copy of the picture of the Teatro San Juan. So you're only allowed to get one copy, and if you guys want me to sign it, I will. But when you go to the back table, you can get one of these and take it. Don't be taking more than one, because I sell these things, and this is how I come up and, you know, raise a little money, a little cash for myself. Because I don't work, I don't have a salary. Like, no, I'm not going to sell it. This is my gift. My gift to you guys so you can remember. Because at the Teatro San Juan right now, you go there and there's nothing, it's a big condo building, and if you want to get yogurt and all the other stuff, you can get there. So this is what the Teatro San Juan was in 1975. I want to thank you, you've been a great audience, and I want to turn it back to Carlos Hernandez.
Before you leave, a couple of things. Let's give Carlos Flores another round of applause. Because, as I said, you know, I don't know if you guys have been following us on Facebook, but if you haven't, you don't believe in Facebook, please don't like us on Facebook, because it's the way it's the only way we are able to get the word out much more economically. But we've done a few exciting events here with the American Sabor exhibition. We've done 3 Latin bands here. We've done in all these presentations. It was a full house. We had our terrace open, and it was just amazing. We've done an event at the National Museum of Mexican Art with Sones de Mexico, and that was wall-to-wall people coming out. And so we're very proud of having the opportunity to bring to you American Sabor, a Smithsonian exhibition that's traveling in the country and will be traveling for the next 5 years. If you have not seen it, please, I just want 1 minute. If you have not seen the exhibition, go across the street, take one of these postcards, because it tells you the hours of when it's open. See the exhibition. You're going to see the impact that Miami had on Latin music. You're going to see and read about the impact of New York the impact of Los Angeles, San Francisco. When we took on the exhibition, we said we wanted to show the impact of Chicago, and that was missing from the exhibition. So our way of turning sort of around was to present to you some of the top Latin bands that were here, the work of Carlos Flores, the work of Carlos Caribe Ruiz, which was here a few weeks ago, and so that was very important to us. So please take a look at the exhibition. How can you help us? This is not easy, folks. We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization, tax exempt. We need your help. If you want to help us, number one, become a member. It's $20 at the table in the back where we have the membership out there. Definitely come to the Cuatro Festival on November the 10th. It's our way, it's our major benefit for all the work that we do throughout the year, the free programming that we have. So we really want you to support the Puerto Rican Arts Alliance and help us pay the bills as we go along here. I also want to recognize Commissioner Anton Reyes was here. Commissioner, can you stand up? We've got other things happening. We've got an exhibition that's up on it's the South Shore Cultural Center, exploring Luis in Chicago with our African American community. It's been drawing out large crowds as well, so we hope that you'll be able to visit that as well. Come back to our center, like us on Facebook, and thank you for being such a charming crowd.